we're gonna react to a video by Spill. I never actually thought I'd ever react to a Spill video because Spill normally covers like YouTube drama, but Spill had a really, really good video on SHEIN and how a lot of their products are really toxic and killing people. So it'll be good to actually look into that as we are further looking into the supply chain and the bad practices of SHEIN and moving into that.
Did you notice something strange about your last SHEIN order?
Like, I took it out the bag.
Important that everyone, especially parents, know whether or not their homes and the clothes that they use are safe. But aside from toxic chemicals, do customers have something else to worry about when it comes to what might be hiding in or crawling out of their SHEIN packages?
Dear SHEIN, I have a problem.
TikTok user See the Glow had received a package from SHEIN the previous day, full of vacation outfits that she began trying on. Yes, everything appeared perfectly fine until the next day.
I open the bag to this beach cover-up and what do I find? A bug. Do y'all see that? I know you see.
Do you know how crazy that is for a bug to be transported across the globe into your package? That is crazy because one day it could be a bug, another day it could be a very, very dangerous disease. That's actually insane. That is actually insane.
See that? What is that, SHEIN? I'm scared. What am I supposed to do? All right, I'm about to pick it up.
One viewer suggested it could be a June bug, but the TikTok uploader claimed that it didn't look like it was from the US, and further clarified that the package was sealed, so she doesn't believe that it could have just flown in. In the end, the TikToker was allegedly refunded for the item with a bug on it, but not the whole order. And while this incident happened back in 2021, it doesn't seem like SHEIN fixed the issue. Since this TikTok, there have been more reports of live bugs in SHEIN packages, what appeared to be spider eggs in a ring, and even live worms.
Oh my gosh, worms and spider eggs in packages. Oh my gosh. That is actually insane. So when you buy clothes from SHEIN, apart from the actual garments being toxic to your skin and to your body, you have to be aware of actual creepy crawlies crawling all over your body and biting you and stuff. And that's what I'm saying. Like one day it could be this. The next day it could literally be a disease that could kill people, which is why you have to be careful sometimes.
That's right. According to TikTok user EmmaCode3, these critters fell onto her feet when ripping open a package. Based on a reverse image search by the New York Post, they seem to be giant mealworms, which are often used by zoos and pet owners to feed spiders, lizards, and scorpions. The incident horrified the TikTok user, whose video went viral. She vowed to never order from the company again and reached out to them for a refund. But in this case, it wasn't as easy. I have contacted SHEIN. They unfortunately told me in emails it's not their fault.
Someone brought up a good point. Well, how reliable is TikTok? I heard lots of kids faking stuff of use. So that's why earlier with the bugs, the person said that essentially there was an expert who verified that the species of bugs that came out of that package, based on looking at it, isn't a bug that actually resides in the US. It's not a species that lives in the US. So that's where the proof comes in. Obviously, you can't just take a TikToker's word for gospel because, yeah, they can fake stuff of views. But then someone actually verified it externally and found that, oh, that's a species of bug that isn't actually in the US. So that's where the proof comes in.
And they aren't liable. They won't give me my money back at all, which sucks, Emma told The Sun. On the other hand, a spokesperson from SHEIN claimed that when they received the customer's inquiry, they immediately launched an investigation, the results of which indicated that when the package completed their quality control process and left their facility, it contained only the SHEIN items ordered. SHEIN also claimed that they offered the TikTok user a full refund. However, the reports of shoppers finding creepy crawlies in SHEIN packages hasn't stopped. In fact, just a month later, another horror story surfaced online.
Just took these joggers out, gave them a waft, spread them out, and this falls out. It's very dead and very flat.
Amy Jowett, the woman in the video, was especially upset since a month before she received the order, there'd been another...
See, that's the thing, like, why I find this very believable, especially in the UK, is because in the UK, we do have cockroaches, but barely. My whole life in the UK, I've maybe seen like 4 cockroaches in my whole life, and they've been tiny cockroaches. Those like really big cockroaches, those look like the cockroaches we have in Nigeria. Those like big black ones. Though you almost never see those. I don't think I've ever seen a cockroach that looks like that in the UK ever, which is why it's believable to me. Like, where would you find a cockroach that's like big and black that you see in tropical countries? in the UK.
A case of a critter allegedly arriving in a Shein order. But unlike the cockroach, this one was alive and venomous.
The Chinese fashion giant SHEIN says it is investigating after a University of Bristol student said she discovered a live scorpion in a parcel from the firm.
According to Sophia Alonso Mossinger, when she saw the scorpion crawling inside the order, she thought she must have been dreaming. And while nobody was harmed, according to experts, the incident could have been deadly.
A specialist animal charity later collected it, adding its sting would have been medically significant and potentially life-threatening.
Yet it seems Shein shoppers have adapted to these horror stories, developing their own strategies to avoid any venomous encounters. These approaches including checking everything thoroughly before opening, beating packages with a fly swatter, and even stomping orders with their feet. But where are
This seems like we are actually in an episode of Black Mirror. Like, this is so dystopian, where when you order clothing, you have to start checking it to see if there's something deadly in there. You have to start beating it to see if a scorpion jumps out. What kind of world are we living in where, like, this has become an issue? You guys know, you guys sense the bugs issue. Obviously, this video is divided into different parts. One part I want to show you guys is people have found blood stains. Some people have found garments poisoned with lead. So we'll kind of go through those different bits just to show you how bad some of these products are.
Let's start with Shein's most noticeable warning signs, the ones that are right in front of you. At least, that's how easy it was for one TikTok user who saw something deeply wrong with her Shein order. Kenzie had ordered a bikini from the brand, but when it arrived, she found that it was stained with what appeared to be blood. She captioned the TikTok, "Shein, thank you so much for these period-stained bikini bottoms, and all they could offer is a return for my trauma." But aside from the discovery being traumatic, what did this stain reveal about the fast fashion giant? Well, if the stain really was blood, the obvious theory was the item had already been used and returned. But many believe this wasn't the case, and there are two big reasons. One is that swimwear should not be returned at all, according to Shein's own return policy. And two, products such as swimwear and underwear shouldn't be resold to prevent risks to customers' health and safety. So, either they broke their own rules and resold used clothing, or that blood allegedly wasn't period blood, possibly coming from in-house. Well, if it was the first option, an investigation into Shein's practices suggested that this wouldn't be the first time that the brand had broken their own rules.
I mean, first of all, we know that in their supply chain, in Shein's supply chain, there is forced labor. So blood being on garments wouldn't surprise me, because if people are being forced via labor camps to make these clothes, then what happens if, let's say, they slack or they don't make garments as fast as possible? They probably get beaten, they're probably abused. And through that abuse, some people might bleed if they are beaten like really badly. Where does that blood go? What if while they are bleeding, they have to go back and start working on things? So it's very, very believable, just using logic, why there could be blood on garments, if you just think of their supply chain.
The non-profit publication Rest of the World found that Shein may have been reselling returned items without properly disclosing it. To learn what happens to returned products, the non-profit bought tops and dresses from Shein, attached air tags to track the items, and returned them to a warehouse in New Jersey. The clothes stayed there for 2 weeks until they were sent to residential addresses. These were the last known locations before the air tags pings disappeared. When a spokesperson from Shein was asked whether the returned items were being resold, they reportedly did not give a direct answer and even denied that they have a warehouse.
See, this is the funny thing about these companies. I don't know why they say, like Shein specifically in this case, is so direct in saying, we by all means do not have any issues. We never resell garments via our policy. And then all someone has to do is like, well, okay, if that's what you think, then we are just going to put air tags in our returned garments and see where it ends up. And they found out that these return items are resold. Like, because it's so easy to find out these things, I don't know why brands don't just be, like, if they are trying to protect themselves, why not be vague from the start? Why implicate yourself by saying, under no circumstances do we do that, and then someone just puts an air tag in the box and then just finds the wrongdoing? Balenci Baddie says, or even injuries from working. I've injured myself with my cheaper sewing machine several times. Yeah, exactly. So like working in a factory, especially in a forced labor context, you're going to have injuries for many different reasons, and blood is involved. And unless there are like certain checks, because you have to think, in a normal workplace, if someone is bleeding, then they obviously have to leave their station and be tended to. However, if it's in a forced labor camp, you can imagine they're just forced to work through it. So yeah, there's dried blood for so many different reasons, whether it's people being weird and like bleeding on things and then returning it, or from the workers themselves.
In New Jersey. Instead, they allegedly said many returned items that cannot be restocked are donated to local charities. But this wasn't the only incident that hinted at a lack of quality control.
Everyone says to order from SHEIN, but they don't talk about the shit that you get like this. Someone explain to me what this is. Someone explain to me. Open it. Oh my god, throw up.
Yes, the TikTok user received her SHEIN order covered in a white substance. As for what it was, well, while commenters threw out theories that it could be mold, a melted piece of paper, or some sort of cry for help from the children at the factory, no one knew for sure. And that was the trouble, because considering SHEIN's alleged track record, there was no telling what the customer could have been exposed to. According to one Reddit user, it wasn't a stain or a mold that alerted them that something was wrong with their SHEIN order, but a scent. When the user took the lace cami top she ordered out of the bag, she found that it smelled like bitter plastic. She didn't try it on because it was too small. However, she claimed that when she accidentally touched her mouth and licked her lips, her mouth dried out and her tongue began to burn. She wrote, "It tasted very bitter and pungent like chemical armpits. Now my neck and tongue veins look dark. It's hard and hurts whenever it's humid outside. And I have a really bad sore under my tongue for over 2 months now." The Reddit user claimed she went to a doctor who couldn't confirm what chemical was in the cami top. All that she
That's crazy. That is insane. That is insane. Where the garments have some toxic chemicals that aren't verifiable by doctors. That's scary. We're living in dystopian times, guys. I just don't think we realize it yet. We don't. I don't think we realize it. Also, Carolina, this is facts. This is why some retailers order shipping samples from a designer before making a big order. Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that. Imani said being weird and bleeding on things. What I mean by that is, like, not every human being is mentally okay upstairs. That's why a lot of humans do really messed up things, right? So because of that, I can imagine there are some sick people that maybe they do have their period and then instead of like washing it or whatever, they return it just because they're just sick in their head, or they got injured while they were wearing a certain SHEIN product and then they return it. Because I just think a lot of humans, mentally not okay up there. So that's what I mean by being weird and bleeding on things. Because it is like they're being weird and vindictive by returning those things.
She allegedly learned is that the symptoms could point to lead poisoning and that her kidneys are now damaged. She wrote a review of the product on SHEIN's website to warn other users of her experience, but for unknown reasons, her 1-star review was allegedly never published. Only 5-star reviews were shown. Did the review violate SHEIN's policies, or did they purposely hide the review from the public? Well, according to SHEIN, the decision to remove a review is ultimately up to their risk control department, who claim to have reasonable and proportionate measures to prevent fake reviews and make sure that the reviews are genuine and reflect the experience of real consumers. So did SHEIN believe the Reddit user's experience was made up, or was the brand trying to cover up a more disturbing truth? Strangely, just as the review disappeared, so did the Reddit post, along with the entire subreddit r/SHEIN_.
CN got the black suits. They got the suits to shut everything down. They shut down the Reddit. They deleted the review. And so isn't that weird? Because the whole point of online reviews is so that when you are about to buy a product, you can read reviews and have a genuine understanding of people's user experience with the product. So if a company is deleting reviews, deleting Reddit, doing all these things, that basically voids the reason to have reviews on your website in the first place. That's crazy. That's crazy.
However, the user was able to repost her story on another subreddit, r/SHEIN, where one commenter suggested, "I've seen that some people will give 5 stars and then state the reality just so the reviews will show. You can try that." Yes, if the Reddit user had been poisoned.
Can you imagine that? So some people have to give a 5-star review just so that SHEIN doesn't delete the review. And then in the comments is where they talk about how bad the garments are. You know that your review system is terrible and unethical when people are giving you 5 stars just so that they can write the negative things. That is insane. That is so insane.
With lead, it was important for other SHEIN shoppers to see her story and know the risks. After all, while her purchase wasn't tested for lead, others
Someone is saying they can't do that legally except for exceptions, defamation. So there are a lot of things that if we're thinking about what is legal, that they can get away with. I mean, going back to the audits and stuff, right? Legally, there are certain legal things that you have to do with a supply chain for a fashion company. So in the case of Armani and Dior, they were using an external factory, and this factory had to do certain things to comply with legal ethics. So they just had to have audits at certain intervals and these kind of things. But then when you look deeper into the audits, they are flawed. And so that's how you can have slave labor, which is illegal, but the way that they were doing the compliance was legal. So just because there are things that I don't think, what my point is, like, the law doesn't really mean much for the most part, because when you think of how things are done in practice, there are very easy ways to overcome legal things, which is why in the case of the factory that Armani and Dior were using, they didn't find any wrongdoing for years until the police got involved. If they just kept doing the legal thing and complying with legal standards and doing legal audits, there would have continued to be slave labor in these factories and it would have gone unchecked. So sometimes, just because the law says something doesn't actually, in reality, how it's practiced doesn't really follow the law. So that's why you always, like, people always think, and this is why you have to look deeper into things. People always think just because something is legal compliant, the whole process is legal. That's not true all the time. And just because, you know, something is unlawful doesn't mean it's going to be enforced. It's one thing for it to be illegal. It's another thing for lawmakers to actually prosecute you for doing illegal things. A lot of companies do illegal things, but they aren't prosecuted. Maybe because the lawmakers in the country deem that it isn't important enough, or all their resources are going elsewhere. This is a big issue with law in general. You think of the UK, there are many people that do illegal things in the UK, and you report that to the police and they're like, well, sorry, we don't have the resources to, you know, follow up that investigation. That happens a lot. If you live in the UK, you would have heard stories like that. So point being, just because it says so in the law doesn't mean that it's enforced. And it also doesn't mean that companies necessarily have to follow those legal requirements. They can go without following those things legally.
have been, and the results are shocking. In September, a mother posted to the subreddit r/newparents, claiming that her son had tested positive for lead. Her local health department reported that one of the sources could be clothes from SHEIN and Temu, and this was news to one parent who commented, "I decided before my baby was born that I wouldn't dress her in SHEIN because I was worried about chemicals. I never considered lead." But unfortunately, after an investigation by CBC Marketplace confirmed the presence of lead in certain SHEIN
People are saying in the comments that SHEIN is going to come for me. So SHEIN can't come for me because technically, for legal reasons, I'm reacting to other people's content. So for legal purposes, these are not my ideas. The ideas about the supply chain, that is an article that I read via Reuters investigation. I've reacted to a video of the lawmakers saying what they were saying. I've reacted to a video by Spill. These are facts presented by Spill, not me. So for legal purposes, these are external makers that are making these things. I am just reacting to external information. None of these opinions are my own. So for legal purposes, SHEIN can't do anything.
products, this is something parents now have to consider.
So this little red purse should not be allowed.
Miriam Diamond says it's not just the smell, it's toxic. This is Health Canada's limit for lead in children's products. Our little red purse is 5 times more than that limit.
Lead has been especially deadly to children throughout history since no amount of it in their blood is safe. However,
Wait. Yo, the health limit of lead is 90, is that milligrams per kilogram? And the mini flap satchel via SHEIN has 508 milligrams per kilogram. Whoa. So you have to be careful. You have to be careful that your skin doesn't start peeling from wearing these things. That is insane. That's actually scary. It should have an allegedly button to press. I know, right? I need to buy one of those stream decks since I'm a streamer now, where every time something like this comes up, I'll just press a button and it says allegedly in my voice.
for a long time, lead was widely used.
It was in the air we breathed, literally. It was in the soil that kids played in. It was on the walls that children lived in.
It took a century to learn that lead is toxic, and still today, families unknowingly live in homes covered in lead-based paint and other materials. So what actions have been taken to protect us? Well, many authorities have chosen the wait-and-see approach.
In other words, we've waited for children to develop lead poisoning before investigating and remediating its source, and we're still doing that.
This is why it's important that everyone, especially parents, know whether or not their homes and the clothes that they use are safe. But aside from toxic chemicals, do customers have something else to worry about when it comes to what might be hiding in or crawling out of their SHEIN packages?
So now we're going to look at SHEIN's chemical poisoning. So this is another aspect of SHEIN.
But how bad can an allergic reaction really get? Well, according to one customer's experience, symptoms can become so severe a person can lose the function of one of their limbs. A TikTok user allegedly got chemical poisoning after using gold flakes from SHEIN for her nails.
Never seen anything like it. I couldn't wash it off. It just disappeared into my skin. Immediately, my hands went numb.
A woman named Sarah Holcomb revealed in a TikTok on her now private account. The next morning, she couldn't feel anything up to her elbow. She went to urgent care, who told her that it was chemical poisoning. And just when she was starting to feel better thanks to medication, her hands started to peel. Javon Ford, a cosmetic chemist who makes informative content about beauty products, explained what may have happened.
So that creator most likely has heavy metal poisoning as a result of using the gold flakes from SHEIN. According to the web...
Just to pause there, I think something that the fashion industry needs is something like IFRA for the fragrance industry. So for people that don't know what IFRA is the International Fragrance Association. And a lot of what IFRA does is they claim, and they are like the representative body of fragrances, and they seek to represent the collective interests of the fragrance industry. So a lot of times when, let's say, fragrances are reformulated, it might be because IFRA put something on the banned list. So people that make fragrances have to remove it, maybe because it's unethical to use, or maybe because they have found that something in a certain molecule is causing people to have reactions. So they tell brands to remove it from their fragrances. And the thing about IFRA is, not in every country do you have to legally follow IFRA. But the reason why a lot of fragrance companies end up having to follow IFRA is because a lot of companies, for them to buy your fragrances, they mandate that you follow IFRA standards. So even though there isn't any, there's no government holding you by the neck saying that you have to follow these standards, you just won't make any money. Because very quickly, you'll kind of be ostracized from the fragrance industry. You won't be able to sell anywhere. You have to go into very specific markets where you can get away with it. Buyers won't buy your fragrances. You won't be stocked in stores. So it almost forces your business to not be viable if you don't follow IFRA. So there are some companies that still don't follow it and don't need to. But for the most part, most companies follow it. If you want to be stocked in, Superdrug and Selfridges and all these places, you have to follow certain regulations. So I think this needs to happen in fashion because you can't really rely on the law. Like I said, the law is extremely flawed, especially for massive companies with loads of resources to take advantage of all the loopholes. So what you need is like a separate body that kind of has control and can block, a lot of things from being in stores and blocking buyers from buying certain things. So yeah, it's very important. Also, yeah, Rachel, for people that don't know, writes about the fragrance industry a lot, and she said the regulations IFRA recommends are essentially EU and California legal regulations and laws, FYI. So that's kind of what we need in fashion. We need something like IFRA, which can force brands into doing that. Otherwise, we're just going to continue having these issues where it's like, oh, but we follow the legal compliance. And it's like, yeah, but it doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't mean anything.
Website, the gold flakes are actually made out of aluminum, which is pretty common because the price point is so low, they can't use actual gold. But even still, aluminum should not cause stinging and numbing of the skin unless you have an allergy to it.
And then there was the possibility the reaction had been caused by undisclosed materials.
It's entirely possible that this product is contaminated with another heavy metal, be it nickel, cadmium, or even mercury. A lot of overseas products have mercury lingering in it.
Gold nail flakes, however, aren't the only SHEIN product that's been linked to unpleasant reactions. Others have reported experiencing breakouts after using makeup from SHEIN cosmetic company SheGlam and even hives.
So, I don't want to get sued by SHEIN or SheGlam, but here are some products that you might want to reconsider before you buy them because I broke out in hives.
And among all the products this TikTok user bought, there were 3 allegedly main culprits. The first being
this thing. It's the blush.
The The second,
The other thing that I'm pretty sure they gave me,
Wait, I need to actually. Shouldn't there be, like, if you sell beauty products, shouldn't there be so many checks and balances? Beauty products are one of those things where you are literally putting chemicals on your skin. So you have to pass certain regulations, surely. How are they even able to sell that? How is that even possible?
like Hives. It's the setting powder.
and the last, a lip product.
Like, first of all, you should not be buying beauty products from SHEIN or Temu. Please, guys. I am begging you for your own good. Do not buy beauty products from SHEIN or Temu. Please. Buy beauty products from actual beauty stores where there have been checks and balances. Go to, if you're in the UK, go to Boots or, go to Sephora or wherever. But please do not go to these places. Please. I'm actually begging you.
Literally broke out in hives again because I was like, it can't be all the products that I'm like allergic to.
Looking at its ingredients list for this product, it contains benzyl benzoate, which is considered to be a potential allergen. However, allergens and irritants are found everywhere, not just in cheap products. This is why it is generally recommended to check the materials and ingredients of products. And here lies the problem with SHEIN. Unlike SHEGLAM, where the ingredients are indicated.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I can almost guess where this video is going, is they're going to talk about how SHEIN doesn't even rightfully put all the products and all the ingredients that are in their products on their ingredient list. So you can read the ingredient list all you want, but there might be some allergens that they don't state that are still in the products. Someone said these are people who can't afford quality makeup. I mean, quality is relative. Not everything is like expensive. Like, not every makeup is expensive, right? And also, makeup is not a necessity. You know what I mean? You don't need makeup to live. So, like, why I'm saying this, once again, going back to my own personal experience, I lived in a village in Nigeria where people were living in extreme poverty. I lived in this village for 2 years. And when I lived in this village, no one used makeup. Because when you're poor, the least of your worries is putting on makeup. You're trying to survive. You're trying to eat food. So people that are too poor to even afford stuff, like the people that I lived with, they are not buying makeup. So because makeup is not a necessity, the last thing you should be doing is buying really toxic makeup from places that aren't verified. You shouldn't be doing that, to be honest. So yeah, I would heavily advise against buying toxic makeup. I would rather you don't buy makeup at all than buy makeup from Temu.
On the SHEIN site, they're unlisted. The chemicals used to treat their clothes' fabrics and other materials mixed in products like the gold flakes are also not disclosed. Because of this, consumers are left in the dark, making every purchase a risk. But hives and allergic reactions aren't the only potential harms of chemically treated products. In fact, one of SHEIN's biggest red flags might just put your life at risk. And it's there, right under customers' noses. What are we talking about? Well, online there have been reports of packages that reek of smoke.
I have just got this jumper from SHEIN. I've tried it on already and it stinks of cigarette smoke.
First time ordering from SHEIN, and did this happen to anybody else? The jeans I ordered have this weird smell to them. I don't know why.
Or perhaps the most notorious of all, fish.
So I've been hearing people been having problems with SHEIN, but this smell like fish at the bottom, right here. Like, I took it out the bag and I'm like, what's that smell? And I don't know who put it on and returned it, but this is disgusting.
In fact, this TikTok user's order smelled so similar to fish that it seemingly sparked someone's appetite.
My dog.
Yeah, clothing smelling of fish is absolutely insane. There could be many reasons for that happening. Of course, we've seen that they do sell some return products. So it could be like worn by someone else and who knows what they were doing with the garment. Rachel also says, I love how France subsidizes some basic beauty products in the pharmacy stores for skin and health safety. Yeah, there are some companies that really do a lot in ensuring that their citizens have very good and safe and compliant products to use. But yeah, kind of my rebuttal to the person earlier, there are other cheap alternatives that aren't toxic to the skin. And then also, it isn't compulsory to wear makeup, which is another conversation entirely. So if I had a choice between wearing makeup or buying extremely cheap products that might make my skin peel and give me permanent facial damage and skin damage, I'll rather just not wear makeup.
Dog is literally chewing up the part that smell like fish. This is to prove to this smell like fish. Okay, this is her sniffing that, y'all.
Yet however bizarre this scent might seem, it was so common in purchase of faux leather and the purses from SHEIN that you could simply refer to it as that smell, and people would know what you were talking about. And what they didn't know was what to do about it.
How do y'all get rid of that fish smell? Because y'all know them SHEIN bags stink.
For example, when a TikTok user named Pamela was faced with this same issue after she purchased boots from SHEIN.
Look beautiful, stink like rotten fish. Disgusting. Biowarfare, yeah.
Soaking the boots in a bath with cleaning products and hanging them out to dry did nothing. So she
That really stood out to me, and I think someone also said this in the chat, where these things are so toxic that they have this fish smell, and instead of, not buying this stuff and finding clothing that's normal smelling, they're like, guys, how do you get rid of the fish smell? Why shouldn't you be concerned why it smells like that and what chemicals could be in the garments? Rather than trying to find ways to mask the fish smell, how about we don't buy these things anymore? How about that?
She tried a TikTok hack, placing the boots in a bag of vinegar and baking soda overnight and then hosing them off. As for the results, well...
I'm going to give them a bit of a sniff test. Oh, no. Didn't. If I go back to SHEIN with these, I will be deducted $4.50 postage.
And it seems smelly products from SHEIN are so common they have even added a smell description option when leaving reviews on products. But what was causing the infamous smell?
That new smell or fishy smell that you sometimes experience when you buy new clothing is because a lot of pleather and synthetic material products are treated with a ton of chemicals, including dyes like this. These dyes can absolutely contribute to that smell, and they're actually even banned in the EU, but they are still commonly used in fast fashion clothing produced in other parts of the world.
Sound familiar? These are the dyes that are known to be allergens, and not only do they contribute to that smell, but they are also considered to be carcinogens and are banned in the EU. Then again, dye isn't the only cancer-causing agent found in clothing.
Y'all, this is another one. Formaldehyde is on our clothing. Sometimes that smell on synthetic clothing is also because products have been finished with formaldehyde, which, yes, is a known carcinogen.
But what other toxic chemicals was SHEIN supposedly hiding? An investigation by CBC Marketplace on SHEIN and other fast fashion brands revealed alarming finds. One of the products the team tested came with the same pungent smell reported on TikTok.
It came and it smelled awful. This was awful.
The bag also contained a familiar culprit, lead.
Would you want her to be wearing this every day, playing with this every day?
No, not at all.
But unlike the almost immediate effects of allergens, the heavy metals, phthalates, and that CBC found in SHEIN's...
Do you know what's crazy about this also? You remember going back to that video that we watched where the SHEIN representative was dilly-dallying around these questions, and we follow all the compliance. Isn't it weird that I just had a quick Google about formaldehyde and what levels are normally allowed in clothing, just for further context. So it says formaldehyde is restricted in clothing in the European Union and other countries. However, some clothing may still contain formaldehyde, and it's important to wash new clothes before wearing them. The EU's REACH regulation limits the use of formaldehyde in consumer products, including clothing. The EU published a new entry in Annex of REACH in July 2023. This entry restricts the amount of formaldehyde that can be released from articles after August 6th, 2026. So that is actually coming into play on the 6th of August in 2026. So there will be even stricter regulations on the levels of formaldehyde. So that's very interesting because it means that, once again, when we talk about law, people are like, oh, what's legal? What's legal? A lot of things are really hard to pass legally because the process is so convoluted to get something passed in law, which is why these changes aren't coming until 2026, right? Because it gives companies an opportunity to change. But in the meantime, they're giving you these toxic clothing with formaldehyde that clearly the government feel is too much, which is why they are regulating it from 2026. So obviously, if it's too much, brands should just not be putting that level of formaldehyde if they cared. But that's the thing. SHEIN might just have the legal limit that's toxic to skin, which is why they are outlawing it soon, because they don't care. They just want to process things as fast as possible. I talk about this all the time. A lot of fast fashion brands do this thing where I talk about cashmere, because cashmere is a fabric that I have a lot of experience with because I've been to a cashmere factory before and seen how things are processed. And with cashmere specifically, cashmere, there are different ways to dry it. You can blast it with heat, but it damages the fibers slightly. Or you can leave it to dry in air, and it takes sometimes days to dry. The higher end brands and the fabrics that are really nice, cashmere, they leave it in the air to dry, so the fibers are not actually damaged. The cashmere that is horrible, the kind of cashmere where you're like, I bought cashmere, like, why is my skin itching? Is because they blast it with heat because they want to process these garments very quickly. And then they smash it in these treatment processes with these crazy chemicals. And then they dye it quickly and throw it into these dyeing cauldrons and call it a day. So that's why, so just because something says 100% cotton, and I always tell people this, it doesn't mean anything because there's so many different ways that that cotton can be processed. The same thing with 100% wool or all these things. So just because something is legal, I'll say it once and say it again, just because something is legal doesn't make it right. And it just means that maybe the law is behind the process.
Items may have effects that may not be noticeable until later on, when it's already too late.
It's not like I was exposed to a poison and then in the next couple of hours I get really sick. It's not that kind of an immediate connection. Maybe you were exposed as a fetus, and maybe the manifestation is an alteration to the male reproductive system, decrease in IQ level.
Overall, CBC found that 1 in 5 products from fashion brands such as SHEIN, AliExpress, and Zaful contained harmful ingredients. But of course, this investigation was published back in 2021. Was it possible SHEIN's practices had changed since then? In September of 2024, Arirang News, an international broadcasting station based in South Korea, reported on the government's attempts to investigate how safe or harmful products from Chinese e-commerce platforms are.
This is the Seoul Electronic Commerce Center, where reports from South Korean consumers buying items on Chinese platforms like Temu and AliExpress are surging, not just due to increased usage, but also growing safety concerns. Materials are cut, liquefied, and analyzed using a spectrometer to determine their composition.
The Seoul government then publishes its findings weekly. Based on the results, the government alerted buyers about the disturbing amounts of hazardous substances from the products on e-commerce sites.
1 in 10 items from Chinese e-commerce sites have been found to fail safety standards and unsafe.
Once again, this goes back to the legal thing that I was talking about, guys, because people be like, isn't it illegal to do these things? But they're still breaking the law because the people that work in these Korean labs have found that 1 in 10, that is a lot considering how many garments these companies sell. 1 in 10 garments coming from these companies in Korea fails the safety standards. But because it's so hard to because you have to invest resources, the government has to invest resources into people actually testing these things, staying on top of these things, which is why a lot of companies can get away with doing things that are illegal, like selling clothing that doesn't even adhere to the safety standards in certain countries.
Products are removed from sale.
The South Korean public has been sending a wave of inquiries on the products they have also bought. However, when it comes to the rest of the world, well, people either remain unaware or unbothered. After all, there are people who have purchased fast fashion throughout their lives without experiencing any problems. Yet, this of course contributes to a false sense of safety, but the effects have always been there. Breathing problems, rashes, and even death from chemicals have been the reality for the textile workers who are making these clothes. And with fast fashion just becoming the norm, it's only a matter of time before researchers learn how much exposure consumers can take before being significantly affected by these products. After all, it's not just SHEIN or other e-commerce site that the public has to worry about. Companies all over the world produce products with harmful amounts of chemicals. But because these brands do not disclose the chemicals and materials that they use, researchers find the lack of data to be extremely concerning. Dr. Kirsten Overdahl, an environmental health research scientist, told The Guardian, "There are often thousands of chemicals in a sample that can't be matched to a known chemical. That's absolutely terrifying. This doesn't mean that every chemical is bad. Maybe it's harmless. But if we can't match a name to a chemical structure, it means that the data is not out there. So you can't say it's not safe, but you also can't say it is safe. This is why, instead of buying from other sites with cheap products or sanitizing packages with pungent scents, experts advise avoiding buying not just from SHEIN, but also from its competitors."
Y'all do not buy cosmetics from SHEIN or Alibaba because there is no regulatory oversight into what goes in those products. Amazon either. Y'all be safe out here.
But what can people do when their go-to brands are no longer safe? Dr. Aaron Carter, a rheumatologist, suggested trying alternative brands instead.
Now, the fast fashion industry is problematic for so many reasons, including high levels of pollution, toxic waste, exploitation of its workers, and now we're finding that these clothing articles and these other products that they make can be harmful to us as well. Now, luckily, there are many brands out there that are focused on sustainability and ethically treating their employees. And as consumers, we have power again to vote with our dollar.
However, for many, the question isn't where can they shop now, but who was still buying from SHEIN in the first place. Online, there's clearly a divide. For many, supporting SHEIN comes down to one thing: money.
There's been a lot of controversy around SHEIN, but to be honest with you, that is quite literally all that I can afford. I know a lot of my friends, we are poor. Like, we are young, we are broke, we don't have good jobs yet. Like, that's all we can afford.
Others have brought up.
Okay, cool. So she's having the affordability conversation. Let me see. Maybe I missed it. What exactly did she buy and what was the price? We need the facts.
Ethically treating their employees. And as consumers, we have power again to vote with our dollar.
However, for many, the question isn't where can they shop now, but who was still buying.
Because when people say they can't afford, the reason why I always bring up Nigeria is because most people in Nigeria, like the people living in poverty in Nigeria, are living in a poverty that I feel like people in the US could not even fathom. I feel like people in the US could not even imagine the levels of poverty that are in Nigeria. So why I bring it up is because I always think, but when I lived in the village, people just bought secondhand clothing. People wore secondhand clothing and it was fine. So if it's a question of affordability, I've lived in a place where people are poor as hell and people just wore secondhand clothes or hand me down from family members or like all these things, right? Or people learned to make their own clothing. So they would find like random discarded fabrics and then learn to make clothing for themselves. That's what people do when they are like poor, like African Nigerian village poor. Like, so these conversations sometimes, it's really hard for me to have these conversations when I've lived in a place where the level of poverty is like so much worse than the US. So that when people say, you know, we are poor and we can't afford anything but SHEIN, I have to question that when secondhand is an option. And it's different. If I was like some millionaire saying this, is different, but I've lived in a village in Nigeria. I've lived there. So I'm not coming from a perspective of some like out of touch rich person. Like, I've lived in a very poor place where people have clothing to wear and people wear secondhand clothing and they look good wearing secondhand clothing. So I always have to question these things. I know it's very easy to say like just affordability and leave it there, but I think questions have to be asked.
From SHEIN in the first place. Online, there's clearly a divide. For many, supporting SHEIN comes down to one thing: money.
There's been a lot of controversy around SHEIN, but to be honest with you, that is quite literally all that I can afford. I know a lot of my friends, we are poor. Like, we are young, we are broke, we don't have good jobs yet. Like, that's all we can afford.
Others have brought up that sustainable shopping isn't always accessible, size inclusive, or maintainable given that so many retailers source their products from the same unethical factories. As a result, people who are against SHEIN have been labeled as elitist. However,
this is also a good point by Leah, and sometimes I do not buy the affordability conversation. Sometimes I genuinely question at what frequency and scale you are purchasing products. Yeah, facts. 100%. 100%. Someone said, notice the house she is making this video in. Exactly. Like, I don't want to get into the affordability conversation because once again, we're not playing, it's not a competition of who is more poor, because I think living in poverty is just a difficult thing, regardless of whether you're poor in the US or Nigeria. Obviously in Nigeria, people living in poverty is a lot worse because there is absolutely no government aid whatsoever in Nigeria. And Nigeria is the kind of place where a lot of places there aren't free schools. And in Nigeria, the free government schools, the government steals the money that is supposed to be used to pay the salary for the teachers. So a lot of the state schools, they don't even function. Like, you go to school and there are just no teachers there and you don't learn anything and you leave the school and you still can't read and write. That is what it's like in Nigeria. There is no government funding for anything. So in Nigeria, you are literally on your own. Like, if you're homeless, you're on the street in Nigeria. Like, you are fucked in Nigeria. Like, I've seen a level of, like, exactly recording on her iPhone. So, like, when people say poor, sometimes it's hard for me to, like, wrap my head around recording TikTok videos and saying that, you know, I'm so poor, all I can afford is SHEIN, when you probably have secondhand garments available to you. Do you know how much like these phones cost? Do you think people in my village in Nigeria can afford an iPhone? Sometimes these conversations, I feel like people just don't want to question their own purchasing decisions. So they chalk it always to, I just can't afford it. And because most people feel bad kind of questioning or having the conversation around affordability because it's quite sensitive, right? So people don't touch it. So these people are never questioned. So then they are allowed to just say, you know, we can't afford anything, and that's why we only buy from SHEIN. I don't know. I just feel like you have to ask some questions about that. We just have to ask the questions. Exactly. This is also true. Literally, the people who make the clothes that you're buying, they are also poor. Facts. And this isn't to play oppression Olympics, but like people need to be for real. And this is also very true. Africa is being poisoned with these cheap products thrown away by other countries. Yeah, because when America discards their waste, it gets dumped into places like Nigeria and Ghana and India. Those are the three main places that a lot of this stuff gets dumped, right? So when you guys are buying your SHEIN pieces and you guys are like, I only want to wear this garment once, and you throw it away, all that toxic stuff gets thrown into my home country. So I don't know, when we have these affordability conversations and you're living nice in a nice home, fan blowing, air conditioning. When I lived in my Nigerian village, there was no electricity. You guys are out here charging your phone, you know, recording TikToks and all this. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Others have pointed out that it isn't poor shaming to call out people who seemingly spend their full paychecks at SHEIN.
I said that people who were paying like top dollar, aka $50, $100+ $300 for stuff that was actually coming from SHEIN, hey, that when they found out that all of this stuff was actually wholesaled from SHEIN, that they shouldn't go right to the source. Those people can afford to shop sustainably. If you weren't paying those prices for stuff that was actually from SHEIN, this video was not about you.
Other advocates have highlighted that if this is an issue of classism, customers aren't the ones at the bottom of the pecking order.
Anyway, the real classism in the SHEIN fast fashion discussion is when y'all repeatedly center the feelings and closets and convenience of poor people in the global north over the actual lives and well-beings of poor people in the global south, specifically the garment workers who are responsible for making those garments, who are poorer than any SHEIN consumer.
There we go. Let's just repeat that just for the people at the back, because that's exactly what we were talking about, right? Very important to mention.
Aren't the ones at the bottom of the pecking order.
Anyway, the real classism in the SHEIN fast fashion discussion is when y'all repeatedly center the feelings and closets and convenience of poor people in the global north over the actual lives and well-beings of poor people in the global south, specifically the garment workers who are responsible for making those garments, who are poorer than any SHEIN consumer.
But if shoppers know this, why do they continue to buy from SHEIN? According to psychologists, it is difficult to prioritize ethics when consumers are being manipulated by marketeers. Fast fashion was designed to trap consumers in a vicious cycle of buying affordable clothes to get a short burst of happiness that eventually plummets due to the poor quality of these items. But is it possible to break this cycle? If you're watching this video, you've already made the first step, which is to be aware. Yes, simply knowing how fast fashion hooks people and then harms them can be enough to put the power back in consumers' hands. And according to experts, public awareness is already on the rise.
The education level is getting higher, the demands for reporting are getting more, and they are going to hit up against that.
In 2023, it was reported that SHEIN lost a third of its market value, dropping from a business valued at $100 billion to $64 billion. Analysts believe this is because of Gen Z's growing awareness of fast fashion's pitfalls. And as we previously mentioned, the South Korean government has begun investigating the negative effects of fast fashion and taken action following outcry from the general public.
I think legislators will step up and make the rules necessary, but that takes people's participation.
Yet that remains the biggest challenge, convincing people that fast fashion does more harm than good.
How do you bring those people in a way that's actually engaging and non-judgmental?
To start, it's more important to come from a place of understanding and realize even small moves towards more sustainable shopping is a big deal.
We can't force everybody to completely opt out of their purchasing habits because not everyone can afford to do so. But it's important that we in the global north at least try. There's power in numbers, and the more of us that stand up against an incredibly harmful system.
Someone is saying every 30 seconds I need to say this is fair use. Fair enough. But yeah, it's interesting. I think two things can be true at once. I think someone alluded to this in the comment section. It's like a multitude of reasons. It's a lack of education coupled with affordability conversations and all those things, because maybe people only view affordability from a standpoint of new clothing, Whereas on the secondhand market, I'm telling you guys can cook. I see people online doing $100, $200 in hauls. If you give me $100 now, I can cook on the secondhand market. Like, I can find some crazy stuff. You give me $100 or $200, I can find you some good, like, 5 to 10 pieces that will last you the next 5 years, and you won't need to buy anything else. But that's only if you're okay with wearing those 5 to 10 items. Because that's another thing. We've had this conversation about the culture of being shamed around repeating outfits and stuff like that. But if it's a conversation of affordability, what really is more affordable? If you buy a garment every month for $5 and it gets destroyed to the point where you need to buy another $5 garment every month, and by the end of the year you've spent $60 versus you bought 2, or let's say 5, or let's say half as many garments, but you bought secondhand clothing that's double that value, that lasts years, who is better off long term? I don't know. I find it really weird. I find some of these conversations really, really strange. Like, maybe next time I go secondhand shopping, I show you guys the kind of stuff that you can, because maybe people might think I'm gaslighting. Genuinely, maybe one day when I go secondhand shopping, I'll like actually vlog and show you guys the prices of some stuff that you can find, especially in like different parts of the world. Like, I'm like,
the more likely it is to fall, or at least change in some meaningful way.
And rather than guilting